Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's see then, does this adjust the audio on the mic? Testing, 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 testing. Nice, yes indeed. Alright, is that full volume? I think so. Cool, so I think we have full volume for my audio right now. I think that's correct. Just gonna bring down the desktop audio as well. We're not gonna need that for a little bit. Okay, so what are we doing right now today? This is a little bit of a surprise stream. Nothing really to talk about on the discussion front. This is actually just going to be a drawing stream, painting stream, some digital art fundamentals. We're going to start out in 2D, and then we might move to 3D in a bit. I'm just setting up my canvases here. And then once that's all set up, we'll switch over to the screen view once that's all set up. Just making sure all my brushes are set. Okay. So we're in business. Let me just get us switched off of the screensaver and we'll get started. Hi everybody, how's it going today? So you're probably not watching this live, but kind of keeping the stream going on my phone as well, so I can kind of keep track of the audio and everything, make sure it's all balanced correctly. I actually put on my glasses as well. So yeah, this is just sort of midweek, out of nowhere. Thought it'd be good to do a little bit of streaming. Since I did not stream last Friday, I've had a couple of things going on the project front. Working on an animatic for my thesis film. And that's coming along all right. But I didn't spend any time working on this stuff, and I think this is a good little opportunity to talk about some stuff that I've been thinking about. So specifically, you all might have noticed that there aren't a whole lot of really great tutorials out there for Krita. There are some, and I'll shout them out for y'all as we go, right? But I do feel like there's a bit of a gap there, and I would like to help jump in and show people how I use Krita, since I'm using it on almost a daily basis now, and it's also an opportunity to talk about how I draw in general, how I paint, how I think visually and sort of build an image, how I try to sort of break down visual problems. Krita is a great place to start. It's an entirely free open source piece of software. It's been around for a long time. It's very robust at this point. You've got great animation tools, great painting tools, right? Um, and so for pretty much any of your basic like raster digital image operations, Krita is about as strong as you can get. And there's a lot of the same types of tools that you know from Photoshop in terms of filters and adjustments and masking and all that kind of stuff. Some of the features do work a little different from Photoshop, but once you sort of get the hang of it, it comes through very easily. And I think that most of your challenge using Krita is going to be more about drawing and painting itself and understanding the kind of image that you're trying to make, understanding how you go about breaking down those visual problems and start solving them on the screen. We can talk about a lot of different kinds of stuff. This is just sort of a little introduction to Krita and to how I draw and paint, right? And it'll connect over to other stuff that we'll see on the stream as well, right? Don't worry, we're gonna keep doing the Nietzsche and the AI art breakdowns and like checking in on current events and all that sort of stuff, conversations about human nature and history, etc. But I'm an artist. That's where I'm coming at all of these things from, and I think it's going to be valuable for folks to see how I approach making art. And yeah, Crit is a core tool for me, absolutely core tool for me right now. And I think anybody that makes visual art, you have to find a drawing and painting tool, something that lets you get sketches out quickly, lets you get ideas down quickly, even if you're just taking notes, right? You'll see that I use Krita on stream in the past. I use this, and I'm going to keep doing this. I use it for also like kind of chalkboard. So like when we're having little discussions and stuff, I can come in here and just sort of like take down little notes and all that kind of thing. Drag and drop images in here. Um, and you have like great little like thing like the line tool in Krita is really great. So you can sort of pop out things like this really quickly and easily and then sort of figure out like what's going on inside of this frame, right? Um, and I actually find Krita's straight edge tool a lot better than Photoshop's in a lot of ways, honestly. Photoshop, you'll hold down the shift key and drag, and that'll snap your cursor to one of these directions, right? So Photoshop gives you the 45s and the right angles on the shift key. But then if you want any angle off of this, then Photoshop has a whole operation where you click and then shift click at the end of that straight edge. And depending on your pressure sensitivity and all that, and it can be a little unpredictable in my experience. Krita, um, Krita is bound to the V key. And we'll talk about, we can talk about all these kinds of details more over time. This is more just like kind of an intro, and now I'm vibing on the straight edge tool in Krita, right? Um, but yeah, it's just bound to the V key, so you can drag out a line anywhere you want on that V key. Hopefully the compression isn't destroying your ability to see this line tool. And then if you hold shift, then it will snap it to specific angles, right? And it actually gives you more than just the 45 and the 90, if you can see that, right? Like I'm snapping to, I think that's every 10 or 20 degrees or so. So that's probably like a 30 and a 60 in there or something like that. Um, And it'll also sort of preview the line, the stroke for you if you sort of click and hold it. So that was a pretty faint line, but if you see if I like really kind of bear down here and then lighten up and then bear down again and lighten up, you get some variation in the line thickness, and I can preview that, right? So it's showing me like, okay, that's where it's sort of placing all that. I can adjust the length of my stroke sort of in real time there. Right, so the line tool in Krita is great. There's a perspective guide system that's, I think, one of the better ones that I've ever used. I don't have a three-point perspective in there, which is a little disappointing. Maybe there's a way of achieving three-point perspective with Krita's built-in guides. I just haven't found it yet. Um, but other than that, it's very flexible. But yeah, so enough about sort of random Krita things. Let's take a look at let's take a look at how I use Krita. And I recorded something the other day. It's not out yet, but I recorded something the other day just sort of walking you through the basics of what the pieces are in Krita, right? And I think we'll probably hold off on doing a super in-depth tour of the software today. I want to I want to work on that as more of a kind of tutorial, a proper tutorial for you guys and sort of pre-record it, right? Just 'cause it's there's a lot of different bits and pieces, and it can be tricky to sort of do this type of thing in real time, right? But just quickly, the way that I have Krita set up, this is fairly similar to how you'll find it set up right out the box. Uh, in fact, I can probably look here. Yeah, so Krita gives you a bunch of different workspaces that come with it by default, and then you can also create your own workspaces and label them. So that's that button up at the top right-hand corner. I have 3 workspaces that I've created for just sort of general drawing and painting, animation, and storyboarding. And I'll show you some of those as well. Krita also, so this is Krita's default workspace. This is probably what it looks like when you download it. And let me get my video out of the way just so that you can see, the full window there. All right, so there you go. That's probably more or less what Krita will look like when you first download and install it. You have your brush palette over here. These are all my custom brushes. Krita has its own brushes as well that come pre-installed, and there's a lot of brush packs out there. This is something that I think you might find to be a little bit more of a learning curve or a bit of an adjustment in Krita if you're coming here from Photoshop. Photoshop has a very robust, well-developed brush library. Um, so they pre-built one and a number of brushes that, just all kinds of brush packs that you can get from pretty much anywhere, right? So Photoshop users might be a little spoiled for brushes, and your Photoshop brushes will not import into Krita. Adobe has a proprietary file format that they use to store those brush settings, and those settings will not translate into the brush engine that Krita has. Krita has its own brush engine, and it's honestly one of my favorite things about Krita is how flexible and usable the brush engine is, but you do need to kind of get used to it a little bit, especially if you're not used to building brushes. Um, we'll probably have a session just to go through the brush engine in Krita. I think the brush engine is really powerful and brush creation is really powerful once you understand how to do it, right? Let me check some things here. So I have like some of my own collections here, just brushes that I've liked and used from other places that do specific things, right? Some stamp type brushes, and then I also have my custom brushes, and I almost exclusively use my own custom brushes at this point, just because I've spent a little bit of time getting those settings dialed in and tweaking them bit by bit over time. And it has a lot of my own character in it. Once you start using your own brushes, it's a little addictive, and you don't need that many crazy brushes. So this is how I have it laid out. It's similar to, oh, pardon me, just pull that off of there. Give me a second to readjust my tool palette. Grab that corner. There we go. Grab that corner, pull it out. Oh, I see. Yeah. This tool palette can be a little sensitive. It wants to snap to the corners a little bit too easily. That hitbox is bigger than I would like it to be, and I don't know. Just some of the little quirks of open source software. Okay, so let me say a little bit about how I have Krita laid out. We have our color palette, right? Krita has a couple of different color palettes if you prefer. There's settings for that, and you can show different color modes, different color spaces, right? I always keep mine on the hue cube. That's kind of my personal preference. And then I keep my brushes underneath the color picker, right? My logic is just that if I'm not picking a brush, I'm picking a color. And if I'm not picking a color, I'm probably picking a brush. I almost never need to see both of these at the same time. So usually it's on the brush selector just because I start very often in monochromatic sketching, just in black and white. Um, I also will have my layer palette right underneath. And this is something that I might reorganize a little bit at some point because I do end up using these tool settings a lot. In fact, if I can pop this out, something like this might honestly make more sense, keeping the tool settings below the layers. But for now, I'll just leave it in sort of my default configuration. So that's layers, tools, tool options, right? Um, Not as relevant to the brush tool, since you have all of the same tool options up here. But for something like the fill tool, there's a lot more options underneath. And this is something in general with all of Krita's tools. It's worth seeing what kinds of options that tool gives you, because there can be a lot, right? This perspective tool, for example. Okay, the perspective tool, you've got a variety of different perspective types that you can use, different guides. Okay. And we've also got a symmetry guide, vertical and horizontal, if you ever need to use that. But for now, let's just do some sketching. Some boring old sketching. If we need to talk about anything specific to Krita as we go, I will talk about that. But for the most part, I more want to talk to you about the fundamentals today. What are the fundamentals? What's the idea of the fundamentals, right? I'm gonna hop over to the chalkboard and start sketching this out for you a little bit. So this is sort of our subject for today. What are fundamentals? Now this is a bit of an art theory discussion as well as an art practice discussion, okay? This concept here, fundamental, is a big one that you come across in pretty much any art form, any craft, right? This might be anything from drafting skills if you're working in 2D. This might be a basic understanding of sort of 3D geometry if you're working with a variety of different media, whether that's digital art, carpentry, etc., right? There's a lot of different things that will be talked about as fundamentals, right? And there can be a lot of disagreement and different takes and different interpretations on what is fundamental to a given art form. If this were more of a discussion of philosophy stream, I would be talking to you about like the etymology of this word and would be breaking that down, trying to understand it from that perspective. But right now, I kind of want to keep this a bit more art focused and not get too distracted by that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of different stuff that people call fundamental, different skills, right, that people will call fundamentals. But I don't think that this is really what we should be thinking about when we think about fundamentals, right? Really, I think the more useful way to think about it, and it's a little bit abstract, but think about this as basically like the the qualities of nature and how humans interact with nature that allow us to do certain kinds of things, if that makes sense, right? So in general, and I mentioned things like, 3D Geo, right? 3D Geo, what that is about understanding mathematics, logic, and geometry as it pertains to like mm, practice in the real world, right? So it's practical mathematics, it's applied, right? So like really the way that I end up thinking about this more is about like sort of applying abstract knowledge, right? And this abstract knowledge can come from a lot of different places. We can be talking about math, we could be talking about science, we could be talking, for example, anatomy is considered a fundamental skill for any kind of illustrator, right? And this is a big part of how I approach my work and my learning and study, right? Is that you know, there's things that you need to know just about the world in order to make artwork, in order to do design, in order to be a filmmaker, etc. People just aren't going to buy it otherwise. Like if you tell them that this thing is supposed to be a face and you don't really know what muscles are underneath there and you're kind of struggling to get it to feel like a face, well, your audience doesn't necessarily know the anatomy of the face. They don't necessarily know about like the orbicularis muscles or like anything about like the kind of tensions and pulling on different fibers and how like fibers and bones and sinews are all interacting underneath the skin to create this impression of a face. People just know that, right? Like we see people all the time and we have this sort of intuitive response, right? But as an artist, you kind of have to figure that out, right? And this is a big part of, if you look back at sort of ancient art, a lot of times people just like artists in particular, it wasn't common practice to gather nearly that kind of detailed reference information about the world, right? You might know a lot about like what people look like. You might even have a very naturalistic approach, and different societies would get more towards that sort of naturalistic depiction of the world. Uh, but getting there is difficult, and it requires real research, right? Not just kind of looking at things and catching a vibe, right? Although that's a perfectly, valid way to approach art making as well. Um, but even if that is the kind of art making you're doing, you're not necessarily trying to like research about anatomy. You still gotta go into color. You still gotta understand something about color. You still gotta understand something about the relationship between shape and emotion, right? These things take time to develop and you have to really study them, and it really helps if there are people around who have already done that kind of work and can help you learn more, right? The only reason why we can make the kind of art that we do today is because of many, many, many generations of humans going back to the beginnings of our species, figuring out, like, piece by piece, how do I make stuff that creates certain impressions, gives a certain emotion, tells certain kinds of stories, looks like a certain type of thing, has particular qualities about it, right? In order to do that, you have to sort of deconstruct your world a little bit. And that's really what the fundamentals are about. Okay? The fundamentals are about, in my humble opinion, that process by which you deconstruct your world, break it down in order to build it back up, right? Um, like I would say, I would call this analysis because I think there like there's some Kantian implications there that I kind of like. I would call this analysis, right? Uh, like breaking down your world and your experience, right? Kendrick Lamar, I pull up on your block and break it down playing Tetris, right? Breaking down your block, man. It's Tetris. Tetris is the fundamentals are a game of Tetris, right? That's what K Dot tells us. Go listen to Humble. It's a great song. Um, all right, so then if that's what we're trying to do, we got this blank canvas here, and we want to figure out some art. Well, I hate to break it to you, but this is not enough. Because you actually need something to respond to, right? And this can be a lot of different things. Generally speaking, as artists, we like stuff like a photograph. Let's see if that comes in. There we go. Maybe that one. Let's keep it a little simple for now. Maybe this one. Yeah. This is like a shot from this I think that's a Shinkai. I think it's a Shinkai shot. Kind of like this photo as well. This is a nice photo, right? It's a whole vibe there. Let me see what else I got. Something you really got to get used to in this world is gathering a reference. Yo, we could do a movie shot. We were just talking about faces. Let's do something from Blade Runner here. Yeah. Roger Deakins is, such a master, right? Okay, so that's his name, right? Roger Deakins? I'm gonna embarrass myself. Oh, yes. I'm just gonna pull out these other layers. It's good to label your layers as you go. I'm just gonna keep that one over here. So what I'm gonna do for y'all in this moment is I'm just gonna start sketching from these, and as we do it, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about the sorts of fundamental skills and concepts that are going to come up for me again and again in doing this sort of image making, and I imagine there might be some value for you. Maybe not, I don't know. Let's just get into it. I'm gonna start with this guy. Start with a little head sketching. Let's get into it from here. In terms of software stuff, we're talking digital image making. If you don't flip your canvas, I highly suggest you start flipping your canvas. I'm pretty sure there's a default hotkey in Photoshop for it. I always keep it bound to Control F for flip. What that does is it helps you to check your proportions and just kind of eyeball stuff, right? Also, if this were a real drawing, I'd probably be starting out here. I don't think you can really see that, right? So I am zooming this in more so that folks can see. And I'm kind of trying to keep my head back a little bit. You don't want to be in here, okay? You want to be physically comfortable, okay? Which I'm getting old and creaky, man. I'm often stiff when I'm drawing. I got to remind myself of these things, right? Personally, though, I do consider physical and mental health to be pretty, if not actually fundamental skills, very closely related to your fundamentals, okay? And the reason why I say that is because all of this stuff, being able to do any of this stuff, even being able to learn how to do this stuff, it does require discipline, okay? And what do I mean by discipline? Well, I specifically mean there are going to be moments when this is difficult. It gets difficult sometimes, okay? It gets quite difficult. And you need to be able to push yourself through that difficulty. There's simply no other way to think about it, right? And that requires focus. It requires real genuine effort, okay? And if you haven't eaten all day, or if you haven't gone outside for a walk, or if you haven't stretched, if your back is killing you, right? Then it can be a lot harder to summon the willpower that you need to do this stuff, okay? And I'm not necessarily saying that willpower and discipline are exactly the same thing, but there's a relationship there. Okay, I think discipline I think of as sort of a larger concept than just willpower, but willpower is definitely something that I would consider fairly core to what discipline is. Also, now as I'm doing this face, you'll see there's a way that I'm constructing it. Okay? Anatomy is very much one of those fundamental skills that I was talking about before. Okay, and why is that the case? Well, anatomy is for an artist not strictly about like human anatomy, biological physiology per se. It's about the structure of things. Okay, what forms and shapes interlock to create this overall form, right? How can I deconstruct this thing, right? And it's important to understand that for an artist, there is no like universal anatomy, all right? Every character, every face has an anatomy sort of their own. And what I mean by that is, mm, for a doctor, the anatomy of the human face is something like this, right? You have your face here. You've got certain muscles that go around the eye socket, right? You have certain muscles that attach to the skull. You have certain muscles that go around the mouth, etc. And this is all well and good. This is anatomy, right? You have bone under that that's sort of connecting those muscles together. Bone here, right? There's a cartilage region there, right? Fantastic. Yes, this is anatomy, right? This is what people generally mean in the world when they say anatomy. As an artist, yes, you're interested in these muscles to an extent, and learning these muscles and learning these bones is going to be very helpful for you. But what you're interested in is ultimately not this muscle, but that shape, okay? So in other words, I can think of the eye as sort of like a diamond shape, or I can think of the eye as sort of like a hexagon shape, right? I can think of it as a square shape. It really kind of depends on the type of character that you're doing, the type of styling that you want to give it, right? And so like very different like kind of styles of character can have very different styles of construction and anatomy, right? What's universal is that there's some kind of sphere, right? Like there's some kind of brain case of some kind. You want to start with some kind of mass, some kind of sort of symmetrical regular mass, and a sphere works pretty well for that. This is the Andrew Loomis system, though. Andrew Loomis, he doesn't exactly start you off with a sphere. What he starts you off with is a sphere that's been truncated. Okay? So he starts you off by sort of carving away at the sphere. And then he has you divide the sphere in half and then drop down by a third below the sort of the base of the sphere into the jaw. We pull the jawline out of that. There's sort of a division there. There's an arc that we kind of carve away through there, right? These aren't muscles, okay? What I'm putting together here for you aren't muscles. This is the anatomy of the human head for an artist, okay? For me, I use a couple of different techniques and sort of mix and match, and it depends on things like, what perspective am I drawing this character from? What kind of face shape do they have? I might use something that's more Loomis for a character. I'm very familiar with Loomis, so I use that as my base anatomy a lot of the time. But a lot of the time, there are other methods that can be just as powerful, right? Like I really like this kind of wedge method. I use this especially for like when I'm storyboarding. Like if you do this kind of like wedge shape with a T at the front, right? And then kind of like blow that out into a box like so. And then I can pull back the jaw, right? This kind of like wedge shape can be a lot more dynamic and sometimes it can be easier to plot in perspective, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can tackle the anatomy of the head. But the important thing to understand when you're doing this as an artist, you're not making a medical diagram, okay? This isn't an actual man who's going to go under the surgeon's blade, so it doesn't really need to be that kind of exercise. What it needs to be is an exercise in finding form, because form is what's going to allow you to find other things that you need to complete the image. Find the lighting, find the surface qualities, right? Find the expression and the gesture and composition, right? So from our perspective, when we talk about anatomy, really what we care about are shapes and forms. It's not it's a massing thing. It's not a medical exercise, okay? Um, so that's sort of that, and let's add that to let's start getting into what are some of our art fundamentals that we're looking at here. So we talked a little bit about anatomy. We might get to some other concepts. I'll probably have more to say about anatomy, but for now, for now, that's what we have. So something I really like, something I really like in this shot here, like blasted with light, the sort of chiaroscuro technique is great here. This actor's sort of expression, the gesture of his face, is really like it's, there we go. Yeah, the sort of the gesture of his face here. I keep moving the layer underneath. So there's like a gesture to these forms, right? You see what I'm saying? There's this swooping shape here that's catching the light in a really interesting way. And then that shape swoops back in that sort of direction, right? So there's sort of like you can kind of feel the saddle shape of like the skull and the jaw there. And he's got like very angular cheekbones, right? That sort of swooping, almost like you see this like samurai masks sometimes will sort of construct it like this. Doing this kind of thing can be really helpful for just sort of understanding overall the shape of a person's face of a character. And also, we should pull up another face at some point on stream and do a little deconstruct, especially if you all like seeing this. Um, it's super valuable to deconstruct different faces and notice how like different people are built different, right? So like maybe a rounder head makes sense for a certain character, but another character is more square. Well, if your character is more square, don't draw a sphere. Don't do the Loomis thing. Give them a box. You know? Like a lot of times when I'm designing characters, one of my favorite things to do when I'm designing characters is to just like draw them head on and just put down shapes, whatever kind of symmetrical shapes, and then like turn those shapes into faces, right? And if you kind of know your anatomical basics, then you start sort of finding like, okay, so let's get some anatomy in there. Let's get some noses in there. Let's get a mouth in there. Like this kind of diamond shape is kind of challenging, right? But like let's see if we can do it, right? So we'll get some eyes going. And it's great to sort of like once you've established gestures, like I've established this kind of a gesture, right? But then also this kind of a gesture. So I'm gonna try to keep that going through the whole thing as much as I can, right? I'm not gonna cheat. I'm not gonna turn this into like a cloak or something. I'm gonna try to like as much as possible make this like an actual person's face shape, right? And like you might have to adjust it a little bit, but that's not too bad there, right? Like okay, there we go. And yeah, I am gonna have to come out the sides here to sort of justify that, and but that's also because I'm going a little bit more naturalistic, right? And I just say like okay, so that's like how this person wears their hair in general. Boom, bun out the top, and they just have like super prominent cheekbones. That's why we got that diamond shape. Usually when people have like more kind of diamond or triangle shaped faces, it is those cheekbones doing a lot of work there, right? Like cheekbones and like a kind of narrower chin together get you to that type of shape real easy. You know, like that's generally how I do it. You might do it different. Go ahead, do it different, right? Um, And like maybe you want to set up a rhythm where like the character's face is all the same type of shape, or maybe you want to kind of like contrast shapes. But if you're gonna like contrast shapes, I think you pretty much always want to like be bold about it. So with this one, his head is a sphere, so I'm just turning his turning those internal features into squares. Okay? And I'm just gonna sort of clean up the circle a little bit. So then we can just sort of like, tidy up the sides there. Give him a little depth, right? And for this lady, I'm not totally satisfied, honestly, with like how I feel like I did cheat a little bit. I cheated a little bit. I changed her head shape too much, and I don't need to do that. We can keep that diamond vibe going, right? Right? And square people are always like a thing. We'll give like square man here some small eyes. And like a small nose, and then we'll give him like a giant mouth. So he just looks like a real dumbass. There we go. Okay, so like mouth being that big, cheeks are getting pushed. Cheeks are getting pushed on a lot there. So let's kind of like create that sideways motion, right? Like we are stretching out this way, which does this because that's where the muscle is, right? Right. Okay. So that's what's happening to this dude. His eyes are probably almost closed. It's like tiny eyes. Scrunching up his brow because that there you go. Like I mean like that's sort of the idea, right? You can do these kind of things all day. There's a whole other method that I really like where you just basically draw emojis and turn those into faces, right? Like once you can do this sort of thing where it's like, oh, it's all shapes. You start with a basic shape, you turn it into a face. Once you're good at that kind of thing, it gets a lot easier to think about things like expressions and so on. Back to our Blade Runner dude. Don't think I forgot this exercise here. I'm just getting away from myself. Okay. It's good to start with a little bit of a larger brush also. Zoom out, big brush, and then kind of knock through it. So something else I think is important to kind of pick up on here is notice that the silhouette of the nose kind of occludes the eye a bit. This is something that happens all the time, is that when you're looking up at someone, things are going to overlap, you know. And you can see I've sort of like held off on sketching in the nose until now, just because I really want to make sure that that shape is preserved. And this is why you flip the canvas, right? You can kind of notice things when you flip it over, like, oh shoot, I missed that angle bad, huh? So I'm just gonna clean out some of these extra lines. And I'm going quiet here because I'm really trying to catch that shape and angle on the nose there. And like at some point you do say close enough, you know? You can't get them all perfect, right? But I think that'll give me something a little closer to the original. I'm not trying to copy it note for note right now. I'm just trying to kind of grab the essence as much as I can and learn a little something while I'm at it, like every time you do an exercise like this, you end up learning new things, and I'm definitely like seeing like okay, there's a lot of really cool light stuff happening in this image. So, and this sort of goes back to what I was talking about before, right? About anatomy and what anatomy really is and why we really care about anatomy. And you might have noticed I was like kind of punching in there a little bit more than I should have been also, really trying to get that nose. It happens every now and then. Um, I might have taken that to a level of detail I didn't really need to, but it at least kind of gets the basics in there. Um, and there we go, right? So like those are sort of like your once your major landmarks are in place, the rest of this gets a lot easier. Okay. Um, so when I was talking before about anatomy, right? We don't think about it like this. We think about it like this, right? Shapes, all about the shapes. That's going to let you get into another key thing, which is light, okay? As I'm sketching, that's something that I'm thinking about kind of the whole time. But you don't really, if you're drawing, you don't really think about light until you start actually putting in some tone into your image, right? So that's sort of what I'm trying to get into right now, right? You can see me sort of darkening some areas a little bit, and that's just sort of pushing them out of the light. And at this point, I also think pretty graphically, like what are the actual sort of shapes of light that I want to create? What are some of the shapes of shadow that I want to create? Because at the end of the day, it's a two-dimensional image. It's right there on a flat page for you. So along the way, you're going to be thinking about it in terms of um, you want to keep thinking about it in terms of a graphic read, right? What are the actual sort of two-dimensional shadow shapes next to what are the actual two-dimensional light shapes, and how do those read together? At the end of the day, it's always a kind of a graphic design problem, right? Which, I would also consider those graphic design fundamentals having to do with sort of proportion and shape and all that. Those are fundamentals for all of us visual artists, right? And that has to do with, as I was saying, sort of geometry and mathematics, right? And I think it's sort of a theme across any of your sort of 2D fundamentals, right? And just like kind of image making fundamentals in general. We're drawing a lot of this from math. We're not necessarily calculating our way to a result, but the way that these things work is very sort of geometric, and the more we can kind of unfold that piece of it, the more power I think you have in your process, right? Just getting the hair in there. The hair is pretty basic. There's a lot of stuff here that we can't really see. He's got some kind of device on behind his ear there, I thought, so I'm just gonna sketch that in a little bit, just sort of indicate. Right. So this is just sort of a very simple sketch, and this can serve as a starting point for a painting. I don't know, I didn't quite nail it, but I got a an essence of it, a kind of a vibe for this thing, right? So a pencil type tool is great for sketching things out specifically, but a lot of times it's not even, you kind of don't want to get stuck on pencils, right? And for me, I do work online a lot. I work from line a lot. So it's always going to be a big part of my process and how I think. But increasingly, especially as your work develops, you want to start thinking more and more in terms of tone as much as you can. Right? At the end of the day, tone is going to be a much more powerful tool for sort of like storytelling and mood, and line by itself isn't going to really cut it. It's too abstract. And you can get your brush nice and big and just sort of like lightly sketch in tone. A lot of times, especially for like storyboarding, this is more than enough, right? If you're ambitious, then you pop in a new layer. You want that underneath. And you probably grab in like a fill tool, and you want something a little lighter. And this is generally speaking how I do a lot of this stuff, is I'll sort of start with a kind of dark to light gradient, something like that, right? Something that can just sort of give you a sense of like the overall direction of lighting in the scene. and sort of a sense of where your brightest points are. And a lot of times this is enough, again, if you're storyboarding, it depends on what kind of image you're trying to make. Um, but at this point, we've done the sketching, which tells us a lot about the shape and form. And from here, I'm just sort of using that as a way to start talking about how the light is going to interact with the forms. Okay, so this is far too bright. Let me go a little bit more subdued for this first pass in here. And Krita has these really wonderful fill brushes that work very similarly to like a fill brush in grease pencil or something like that. You can't quite do all the same types of things with it, but I think this is a very powerful way to approach fill in like kind of a sketchy way without having to keep pulling out my lasso tool, right? So if you paint a lot with the lasso tool, you'll probably really enjoy Krita's fill brush, right? I'm just kind of going through and hitting some areas, roping out darker regions of the image, darker regions of the face, and I'm kind of creeping up on it, you know? I don't want to do it all at once. I don't want to go as dark as possible right away. But more or less what I'm trying to do is split the light side from the shadow side of the face and start getting a sense of where one ends and the next begins. And that might even be too aggressive there, so let me just get it in some tone for the hair there. And as I said, painting with the lasso, you still want to pull out that lasso. Okay. I like just the look of sort of softly starting to dap in that light. It's a digital painting classic. Lasso plus soft brush, right? Really lets you pull together a more dimensional look to your lighting, right? Keeps those shadow areas properly highlighted. And then we're going to do some hotter points at the end of all of this. For example, right here in the eye, get a little bump on the sort of glossier areas of the face. And it's a sketch, but it's a respectable sketch. This is not a 3-hour painting, but I think that kind of gives you a sense of how I might start building something up and what fundamentals I'm thinking about as I go. We'll do some more thorough breakdowns of concepts like light, and I can talk to you about how the light specifically works and how it's built and sort of material qualities and all that kind of thing. Talk about anatomy, talk about math, right? Uh, But for now, let's take a little break, and I might actually sort of end the stream here, because I don't necessarily have too much more to talk about today. But I'll be back in some time. Okay, okay. So here we are, folks. We are in the home stretch right now, and I think we're done for today. Let's switch back and we'll chat a little bit. How's it going, everybody? This is the thing that I'm testing out. Ooh. This sounds a lot better when I bring it closer to my mouth. I feel like that might be the thing to keep in mind from here on out. Cool. Yeah, yeah. All right. So I don't think I have too much more to look at over here, but just so that just in case y'all have forgotten what kind of channel this is. Um, we're actually just about at the top of the hour here, so I think I'm gonna save any longer discussion for Friday or this weekend. I'm not sure if I need to commit to Fridays as the time. It'd be nice to get some feedback from folks. When do you like to watch or listen to a stream like this? And just in general, how's it going out there? Are you enjoying yourself in life? Are you handling the vicissitudes of this world okay? Uh, so there's a specific there was a joke that came out last week, and I don't think I'm going to be able to find an example of it right now. Um, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to find it right now, but I wanted to show you this one because it freaked me out a little bit. Let me see if I can find it here. This is Michael. Oh, I switched over my display. I guess I must have a hotkey on that. My bad. Let's see. Don't think this is a real. I don't think there's going to be. Dang. I think it was like it was a thing on X that X, the thing on fucking Twitter that my roommate saw, and he was kind of he told me about it. We both thought it was legit for like a couple hours. That there was some kind of discussion of Michael Bay perhaps doing a James Bond James Bond film with Idris Elba, and I got very upset. I got very upset thinking that this was a real thing. And thank goodness it was not. But the fact that it got me so hot and bothered, I feel like indicates some interesting things about where we are at with filmmaking, with Hollywood. Um, yeah, there's a Minecraft movie now, the Electric State film. I still haven't seen it. I'm I'm fairly disappointed in what's been done with Mr. Stalinog's brilliant creations. Mm. I think it's a shame that there isn't more courageous filmmaking happening in the U.S. right now, but the U.S. is not a place of excessive courage at the moment in general, which is just is generally disappointing. Um, we're gonna have a conversation soon about some of these things. I got some friends actually who might want to talk on stream about movies and movie making. Um, so we'll see if we can get something like that set up soon. Hopefully there's some stuff coming out on IG Live soon. I'm right now pretty deep in the pitch process, the pitch development process for my thesis project. So hopefully I'll get to share some of that with you guys soon, but it is definitely eating up some time and attention. But if you've watched the stream up to this point, I really appreciate you coming in today. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you got something out of this. And hit me up if you have any questions, comments, concerns, quips, quibbles. We'll call that a stream. Good night, folks.